Greetings! This is the story of a colony known as Ellis. It was a quite successful colony, one which had faced many trials and tribulations and emerged victoriously each time. Everything was nice in Ellis until one day a massive raiding party struck. After a vicious fight, the colonists began the difficult work of rebuilding. Dealing with the bodies took longer than expected, and the sights and smells of the dead had everyone on edge and close to breaking. Eventually they contained it and disposed of all the bodies, burning some, burying others, and it looked like life in Ellis was about to get back on track. And that's where our story starts, a colony reeling from a tough battle and cleanup, ready to just get back to normal. Now, of course, they couldn't know that it was all about to go to a new level of hell, the likes of which they'd never seen before. And it started with squirrels. A psychic wave swept over the land, and dozens upon dozens of squirrels went mad and swarmed the colony. And everyone ran for it, wanting to hole up within the main building and use the narrow hallways as a squirrel killing zone. Pretty reasonable, right? There were something like 16 different colonists inside, and several outside who were swept up and incapacitated by this ravenous, rampaging squirrel horde. The killing zones were established, the survivors ran in, and the squirrels followed. There were riflemen up front, melee backing them up, and the charge of the squirrel brigade was in full swing. And it was messy. It was messy and horrible, and there were casualties. Jimbo and Santos fell, and in the confusion, the last prisoners said, "You know what? To hell with this," and made a break for it. Whether they made it past the squirrels is hard to say, but, it was a thought that counted. With the wave of squirrels defeated, it was time to slip and slide through the gore and try to recover all of the wounded outside. Rose, the assassin, was the furthest out, but there were also a few others to deal with. The casualties were collected and brought to the medical bay, and those not wounded did what they could to try to recover. Now, one might criticize the head of the colony for not immediately tasking all ambulatory survivors with medical care duties, but to be fair, he didn't think that squirrel wounds were dire threats to life and limb. We all make mistakes. The halls were filled, choking with squirrel gore, blood, little twitching squirrel bodies, and quite a bit of colonist blood on top of that. So Big Red, one of the colonists, he was a bit frustrated with this, and he started to go around and bash the little twitching squirrel brains in. There were so many, the task was just too much for him. And he finally gave up and decided to just let them suffer and succumb to their wounds. Naturally. And that's when the infections began. One of the colonists, Toasty, took this intelligently as his cue to get the hell out of there, and who can blame him? Things were quite bad. Unfortunately, no one really realized just how bad they were. The injured were in hospital beds and unable to tend to themselves. And they were hungry and starving, actually. A colonist named Seven was trying to feed some, but it was a task beyond any one person's capabilities. And then the death began. And the first to die was, rather ironically, Doc. And he died of starvation, laid out incapacitated in a prison cell. Forgotten amidst the chaos, an earlier victim of a mental break. And yet, still, there was no food to be had. Everyone else was out and about, fending for themselves with no real mind towards the needs of the many wounded or the one imprisoned. Now at this point, management realized that something was amiss. And as it turned out, the wounded included most of the doctors. So the other colonists were told to sort it out and start helping with treatment and feeding before it was too late. And there were 17 colonists at this point, 8 in the medical bay, 9 elsewhere. So we have these colonists rushing to the medical bay, and before they can get there, Kruger falls victim to starvation. It's a horrible death, but it's only the beginning of the horrors that are in the process of engulfing Ellis. Now, he too was a prisoner as Doc had been, and like Doc, there was too much chaos for anyone to remember the 2 fragile minds that had been locked behind bars until they could be rehabilitated in a calmer time. But back in the medical bay, before the help could arrive, Wolfen starved. And Brooks and Benico rushed in to try to give aid and food to those suffering in that infernal bay. Now, Bishop couldn't take it, and with a glazed expression, he gave up and just wandered the halls. And mid-treatment, Gorar slips away. And he's another preventable starvation death. And Bishop's out there wandering, just broken, and he hears it, but his mind is just too far gone. He wanders nearby and wonders what he could have done differently. And then Santos snaps and leaves. And Rose, the assassin, and Callie die of infection. The numbed survivors strip the dead of their gear and armor, as if they'll have a use for it, as if they can recover and move on from here. and Duster, who had been in a daze, snaps out of it just in time to witness Kay and Beck die from their infections. Bishop hears this distantly and collapses in the hall. Marty rushes to take him to the medical bay. He's lost the will to live, though, and sadly, Bishop dies shortly after being put in bed. He'd been there from the start, but that was too much. Watching his fellow colonists die was too much for him. Santos, broken, wandering out somewhere, starves to death and escapes the grim reality he's found himself in. But Bluebird, she's found something special, something to maintain her sanity. She's walking around putting plants in pots to decorate the rooms of those who are dead or dying. And then Jimbo, the last survivor in the medical bay, succumbs to his infection. Clovis follows Bluebird's lead, putting plants in pots of rooms that will never again be occupied. And there are now 9 left. There's Brooks, Clovis, Welsh, Woodard, Big Red, Bluebird, Duster, Benico, and Marty. Brooks has seen enough. They snap and leave the colony, and who can really blame them at this point? With the medical bay emptied out, everyone busies themselves as if there's a chance of turning things around. And maybe there is some hope. The body of Santos is found. Dead of starvation, dead in the freezer, surrounded by enough food to last months. Having seen more than enough, Big Red and Benico leave. Clovis, Welsh, Woodard, Bluebird, and Duster are the only ones left. Marty has gone mad and is wandering outside the eastern walls, when suddenly, pirates. Lots of pirates, and there are no defenses to speak of. But maybe, just maybe, the colonists can rush around and get some turrets created before the pirates' assault. In the chaos and madness of the squirrels and the aftermath of that, no one had thought to rebuild those crucial turrets. It was a mistake, one which will definitely have to be paid for. So Clovis and Welsh run off to get steel. They're heading out south of the pirate band, and the pirates have set their mortar up and now they're shelling the colony. Rushing back with the desperately needed steel, Clovis snaps and attacks Welsh. And Welsh defends herself, and then, as she's doing so, she realizes that a swarm of pirates is descending upon the base. They're right nearby, and rushing right at them. She runs back through the entrance, pursued by Clovis, nearly trampled by the pirates. Meanwhile, Marty starves to death on the eastern wall, and he's spared. There are at least 25 pirates trying to break into the camp. Welsh rushes through the entrance and into what was once a great killing ground, only there's no one and nothing there to help her. The pirates almost seem to ignore her for a moment. Then she winds up to clock one and is smashed to the ground. Alerted, Woodard, Duster, and Bluebird run for weapons. And the pirates are swarming in now. Welsh is incapacitated, forgotten. It would have been a mercy to die, but she's not dead, she's just ignored. They'll come back for her. Bluebird's doomsday launcher seems an apt choice here, all things considered. If this isn't doomsday, well, wouldn't that be something rich? She lines up and takes the shot. And kablam! Takes out 3 and lights a few small fires in the process. With the pirates rushing all about, it's time to make a last stand. Woodard doesn't make it, too slow, but Bluebird and Duster rush inside and take up defensive positions in a hallway choke point. And they turn the heat and the lights off. You can't make it easy. Shockingly, the pirates decide to take who they can and run for it instead of staying and fighting. Clovis and Woodard, defenseless and incapacitated, are taken. But then the sole surviving sentry gun kills Woodard's captor, only for someone else to rush back, pick them up, and run away. And as the pirates are fleeing out east, they're passing the emaciated body of Marty. In a rather sick miracle, Welsh has been left behind. Bluebird and Duster, both very badly shaken by the ordeal, draw straws, and Bluebird goes to retrieve her. But the sight of Bluebird bringing Welsh's wounded form inside is just the straw Duster needs to finally snap. He rushes towards Bluebird, but loses her in the darkness. Bluebird puts her safely in bed, then comes back to try to subdue Duster. And amazingly, Duster overpowers Bluebird and knocks her to the ground. So Welsh is in shock in the medical bay. Duster's snapped and is raving and storming around the compound. And then he collapses. Welsh is down and out. Duster and Bluebird are down. Seems like the end. Is this the end? But no. it's not the end because there are further circles of hell yet to explore. Duster can still move. Duster gets up, regains his sanity, and drags Bluebird to medical. He's about to treat Welsh when he collapses back into a state of shock, stumbling around and mumbling incoherently at the side of the medical bay full of the bodies of former friends and colonists. And there's blood everywhere, the deep puddles and streaks of crimson, and it's all heating up in the marsh warmth. Duster finally comes out of it and heads off to get food for the starving wounded, thinking of them first. He feeds Welsh, goes back, and feeds Bluebird, and in an amazing display of selflessness, after feeding Bluebird, he takes a few steps and falls dead of starvation, so that others may live. The heat has now caused the medical bay's corpses to begin to rot. The stench is unbearable. Bluebird stumbles her way out of bed with the intent to help Welsh, but as she's immersed into the horror around her, she gives up and leaves, and she takes a scenic route out, the fresh and open air, the greenery, the possibilities to be explored, and memories to be purged. Back inside in the heat, darkness, Welsh is incoherent. She stumbles out of bed and goes mad, rampaging around. She comes to again next to the partially assembled ship. Maybe she had some hope left. Maybe it shook her back to sanity. Maybe there's a glimmer there. Maybe that gave her something to hang on to. She goes back inside, slipping and sliding through the blood to try to find something to eat. But then inevitably wanders back to the medical bay in pain. It's all she knows now. The death is familiar, sickly, comforting. She doesn't have the energy or the sanity to mind the fact that she's sharing a bed with a corpse, surrounded by rotting friends. She tries to rest, deliriously tries to forget what's happening. And she can't really remember what food is. All she smells is death and rot and pain, and all she hears are the cries of the dead and the damned. And then, Outlanders arrive. The power goes off. Maybe they'll think no one's home. But, alas, they storm in anyway. Dozens of them. They filter through the area. They've heard about the mortar pit. It's grown quite a reputation there, and that's the first place they go, only to find it unmanned. Maybe in the darkness they didn't see the walls splattered with squirrel and colonist alike. There's only one tiny hope left. If they get close to the mortars as they're destroyed, maybe. But no. The explosions kill a few, but it's not enough. The mortars are taken out, the last sentry gun destroyed, and fires are started, first at the prisoner bay, then inside the main compound. Now, Welsh hears this, but she doesn't see it. She's delirious with hunger, fatigue, pain, and the horror of what she's seen, what her life has become. But she's not done. She didn't come this far to die in bed. Stumbling from her bed one last time, she goes to the minigun lying in the aisle. She can't remember whose it is, and it doesn't matter. As she lifts it up, everything turns red. She's beyond reason and beyond sanity. She moves out into the dark hall and stops. There are footsteps behind her, and a retching gasp as a raider moves through the charnel house of the medical bay. He turns the corner, and a vicious, violent melee begins. The raider might as well be facing a zombie for all he knows. The smell of death is thick, and in the darkness, it's just filth and claws and screaming. Welsh, in her weakened state, is quickly knocked down, but the raider is horrified. He smashes her again and again, absolutely terrified. He's more afraid than she is. She's ready. She dies, not from the blows, but from the starvation. The raiders, they see for the first time. They're aghast at what has befallen the place, and they give up on looting. Ellis must burn to the ground. Fires start, spread, and a raider or two falls victim to the haste with which they try to eradicate the place. The prison cells are engulfed first, and then the main living quarters. A few run to set the secondary quarters alight, but all seem to avoid lingering long in the corpse-ridden medical bay with the rot and the unfathomable, unnatural darkness. There is one small final mercy that can happen here, but as the flames begin to extinguish, it seems less and less likely, until the batteries catch. One by one, they burst into flames and explode, a sparking, violent fuse leading up to the medical bay. The last one starts the only fire that matters. As the roofs cave in around the complex, the medical bay alights and burns brightly, fueled with the hopes and dreams of more than a dozen colonists And then, mercifully, the fire spread to consume their last survivor, and Welsh is incinerated. The interior is gutted, yet the spaceship remains in partial assembly almost untouched. And the last flickering flame dies out as a hard rain chases the last Outlanders away. And when morning comes, there's nothing but caved-in roofs, charred bones, spoiling meat, and the detritus of a hard-fought struggle to survive on this god-forsaken hellhole. Ellis is gone. And they say that if you go there now and wander those empty halls, you might hear a whisper on the wind as it winds through a shattered dream, a voice that's almost imperceptible, saying, "Losing is fun." And that's RimWorld.